right, hello everyone. I'm Anthony Martin, this is Amy Shah. We'll just quickly introduce ourselves before we get into our talk. Now I feel like Akash has probably stolen half of our talk already, so you know that's cool, we're half done, sweet, finished, sorted. So who am I? So I'm a product leadership coach, currently working with Harmony, hence the t-shirt. We're hiring, by the way, we're hiring product managers, hiring UX designers. And I've done some work with Foodstuffs and a few other companies. Basically, I help companies understand how to do product management and also, because of my background, help them to understand how to work properly with data platforms, AI and things like that as well. And I've previously been head of products for data platform companies in health tech and marketing technology. And I'm also the chair of an organisation called Product Aotearoa. This is an organisation that supports product people across the country. In Auckland, we run the Product Tank Auckland meetup group, and we work with other meetup groups as well. There's a meetup group in Wellington and Christchurch as well. Very keen to support product people and people who are interested in product across the country. We've done a little bit of work with Tech Futures on their product management course, which I highly recommend, by the way. It is a very, very, very good course, primarily focused around discovery, which I will talk a bit about tonight as well. And my co-presenter, Amy.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. So I'm Amy Shah, and now I work for Westpac as a service owner to look after the access analytics platforms, existing platform and new fancy next generation platform as well. Prior to Westpac, I worked for quite a lot of big companies like someone probably you guys heard about it, like eBay, Tencent, these big companies, basically on the big data and AI area for over a decade. And same as Anthony, actually I'm the committee member of Product Agile, and I'm very interested to connect people worldwide, support product people grow, and connect with each other to share our successful stories. That's a brief introduction.
There we go. All right. So quick check in the room. How many people hold a product role of some sort, including sort of BA and whatnot? Okay, about a third or so. How many people hold a data role of some sort? Okay, so about 50-50. Okay, so there's going to be a bit of a crossover talk. So apologies to the product people. I might be going over some basics you already know. Apologies to the data people. We might go over a bit of basics that you guys already know, but we're kind of talking about the intersection of these two things. So I'm very quickly going to talk about the basics of product management and kind of where data plays a role in that. So firstly, when we start, we do a lot around vision and strategy. So this is, what do our users want? What do they need? What are our opportunities out there to take action? And where are we going to focus our efforts now, next, and later, which you may have heard of this, a typical roadmap format. What are we working on now? Where are we going next? And what are we going to do later? And that's a very data-driven type of exercise because we're looking at what's out there. What is our product currently telling us about the world? Or maybe if we don't have a product in market right now, what research have we done? What data have we been able to gather to support the fact that we're going to be putting all this money into a product that's hopefully going to last a number of years? And obviously we're investing a lot, so we want to actually have some real facts to work from. And once we kind of set our general direction, we then move into discovery. So we've got an opportunity to launch a product or launch a new feature, but can we actually prove to ourselves first before we start investing in really expensive engineering that this is actually worth our time doing? And there we look across 5 dimensions. So we look at whether or not this thing is actually valuable. So can we sell it? Can we price it? Can we make money off it? In doing that, we might actually discover actually that's not worth doing. Maybe something else is more valuable for that. And then is it usable? So will our customers adopt it? Can our customers use it? What's the context around it? And if they're not using our thing, what would they be using instead? By the way, it's almost always Excel, particularly in data products. Competition's always Excel. So that's kind of on the user side of things. Then on our business side of things, we're looking at whether or not it's technically feasible. So we've got this idea. Can we actually build it? Can we do the engineering to create it? Can we incorporate it into our organization? Do we have, are we asking too much of our data platform as an example? Do we even have a data platform? Is it feasible? And then lastly, is it feasible for our business? So firstly, can we make money off it? So can we survive with this opportunity? Is it actually going to make a margin, a positive margin on it? So we're actually going to make a profit on it. Can our business support it? Can we get it into the market? It might be a really, really good idea, but actually can we get it into the hands of our customers? And then the last thing, which I'll come to at the end, is so we've done all of that. We've decided that this is actually worth our while doing, but ethically, should we do it? And this is becoming a bigger and bigger topic in product management, and particularly with the rise of data-driven outcomes around using things like AI and whatnot. Hands up if you've seen The Social Network. Okay. If you haven't, you should watch it already. And as I said, I'll come back to more on ethics towards the end of the talk. So we've done our discovery, we've figured out that this thing is actually worth building. Then the product manager was working with the engineering team or whoever else is required to actually get this thing into production, into the market. So during discovery, we've probably prototyped it. We now need to make that prototype scalable, reliable, something that we can actually give to tens or hundreds or thousands or millions of users. And most people have already heard the product owner role. This is often where that role kind of plays a part in that delivery cycle. So we've built it, but now we have to actually get it into the hands of our customers. So this week when I did a quick search, when I was putting this together looking for an image, which I thought this was terribly appropriate. Okay, so phase 1, collect big data. Phase 2, profit. Yes, excellent. So the go-to-market is establishing what that question mark piece is. So we've built it, it's going to be amazing, but can we actually get it into the hands of our users and make it profitable? So there it's looking at how do we price it, how do we position it, how do we market it, and a lot of data that comes into that. Maybe we've done pricing surveys, maybe we've looked at patterns of usage and whatnot to establish what part of our market is actually going to take this, and then how are we actually going to get it to those users. So a great example that I heard, a company, I won't name who they are, they are in the retail sector and their product is a machine learning thing, so machine learning built into it, and it relies on images of retail products. But to deploy it into a store, they have to have images of every single product that this business actually sells. And so that's an interesting barrier to getting something into market that sounds like a really good idea, but you've got to gather all this collateral first before you can even launch it with that customer. And also this applies to both internal and external products. I mentioned the distinction between those two. So an external product might be something that you sell to your customers, but you might have an internal product that your developers consume. So particularly around data platforms, internal analytics and whatnot, that's an example of something that we need to get into the hands of our internal users. So can we train our users on it? Will they actually be able to use it? Considerations like that. And then yay, we've got it into the market. We did all this discovery up front and we thought it was going to be amazing. It's going to make us all this money. But did it? Did it actually have the impact that we thought it was going to? And that's both initially and then over time. And once we've actually got into the market, we've got that data back from the product to see how it's performing. Karina, I know this is a topic you're particularly passionate about. What do we do next based on that information that we're getting off the product, the data that's coming back from the product, both in terms of how a customer is using it, but also what they're actually doing under the hood, the effect on the data that's having in our platform, which Amy will talk a bit more about. Based on all that information, what do we do next? Do we do more of this? Do we do less of this? Do we maybe kill this? Which is then sort of the last bit of the role of product management and creating great products is then end-of-lifing things. Like, okay, is actually anybody still using this? One of the most embarrassing moments as a product manager was with a certain organisation, of which there are some representatives here today, where everyone told me that there was a feature that was no longer being used and we should end of life it. But I had no way of proving that. It was just purely anecdotal. We had no data in our platform that enabled us to tell whether or not anyone was actually using this thing. And as a product manager, it's a really, really bad place to be if you have to go to your customer and say, you guys like using this? It's a really embarrassing conversation to have. So definitely data plays a massively key role in that particular part of your job. And it's also helpful if you plan for end of life up front. So what is the criteria by which we will kill something? I used to work in mobile banking, and we had to set up criteria up front about what Android versions and what iOS versions we would support over time. And it made it a lot easier for us to have our conversations with our customers. We sort of defined a criteria if a certain version was, I think, less than 5% or 3% or something, we would end of life support for that particular version of Android. And the fact that we had that conversation with them up front made the killing off of that thing a year or 2 years later so much easier to do because we set that criteria up front. This is something that often gets overlooked in product management. So that's the basics of product management and how it applies to data. So next I'm going to just dive a little bit on the discovery topic and talk about how data science and user research are really closely related and how these things get connected together in the discovery cycle. So I'm going to do a little bit of an example here. I was racking my brains trying to think of an example of an organisation that I haven't actually worked for before, so that I'm not sharing any confidential information. So I've never worked for an airline. So I'm going to talk about, okay, how might we go about establishing a model that allows people to predict what their boarding time on an aircraft is going to be. And we've got this app and we want to enhance it with the boarding times. So our data science team go out there and create a hypothesis that we've got sufficient signals in our data that we can predict the boarding time for an aircraft. And so go out and find what data we're going to use for that. You know, maybe we look at the time from when the flight was supposed to depart and when it actually departs. Maybe we look at traffic patterns of apps within the terminal and things like that, whatever data we can get our hands on. So our data science team is busily exploring that data and they're selecting and testing and trying to find a model that fits that data to predict what our boarding time is going to be. We create a proof of concept and we get it out there and we go, oh yeah, okay, so we've put this thing out there and our model says that boarding times in the morning are always longer than boarding times in the afternoon. So our model is able to predict this, yay, great. We put it out there and test it, and yep, it fits the data so it fits the real world implementation just nicely. And so we say, great, we'll put it into production because that's a really awesome data model. But all we've done in this cycle is we've looked at the what's going on, and based on that what, we've made a decision to put something into our product. There's another side of the coin, and that's user research. So user research is often done by people in a user experience or product design role. Product managers do it as well. Often we delegate it to these people because they're much better at it than we are. So from a user research perspective, if I was approaching the same problem around that flight boarding issue, is okay, so I'm going to create a hypothesis that I can predict flight boarding time, same thing. But I'm going to go out there and actually talk to some people. So I decide that I'm going to interview 5 people in the terminal, I'm going to interview 5 people who are checking their bags in, I'm going to go onto the plane, I'm going to interview 5 people getting in their seats to find out what made up their journey to get onto that plane and what caused the time. So I create some interview questions, I go out there and conduct some interviews and I process the results. And in doing that, what I find is that half the plane in the morning stopped by the coffee machine in the terminal on the way through. But I didn't find that out from my data. My data just told me that it just took a little bit longer in the morning versus the afternoon. But now from doing that user research, I've now figured out why. So I've gone from the what of my data to the why. And in doing so, I can go, oh, well, that's really interesting. Half of the people on the plane get a coffee on the way in. Maybe I can put ordering a coffee into the app and that might speed things up. And I've just discovered a new product opportunity as a result of doing that. But if I'd just gone down the data path alone, I wouldn't have seen that opportunity. So it's that what versus why conversation that user research provides the why. So I'm proposing this is how that cycle might work if we've got our user research people and our data science people working together. That when we're finding our interview subjects to determine whether or not our hypothesis is accurate, that's going to be related to what data sources I'm going to look at. So if I work out who I'm going to talk to, I should try and find data sources around those people. Maybe now I'm going to bring in sales from the coffee cart and look at how that correlates in time. When I'm going as a data science person, when I'm exploring my data, I want to be sitting with the user research person and helping them to understand what questions they might want to ask, because I've seen this really interesting anomaly in my data and I want to try and find out why that's going on. And then when I'm creating models and testing models on historical data, I probably want to correlate that with the user interviews that I'm doing, because I see this really interesting pattern in my data, and right, I see the answer to that interview question. I now see why it's happening. I've got a what and I've got a why, and I can bring those together. And then, I'm going to bring that information together, create some kind of proof of concept, put it out there, and I'm going to test my prototype by talking to people, and I'm going to test my prototype by looking at the data. And from that, now I've got a couple of really interesting insights that I can bring together and create a really awesome product, which I can then validate. And as I said, we've decided, okay, yay, we're going to put ordering a coffee into our app, as opposed to just a number saying this is what our boarding time is. Right, so that's an example of how to apply discovery. Now Amy will talk about, okay, how does this actually work in terms of putting stuff into a platform? Amy.
Thank you, Anthony. So I'm going to share some lessons I learned over the past few years regarding to the data product. So I've been working on data product from 2008. It's been about 12 years, more than 12 years. Start from the discovery cycle. So I think the exciting moment will be, okay, how can we turn the discovery into a product? So here it looks like a data pipeline, but please don't view this as a data pipeline. Those are the key aspects of a data product. Make something exciting, deliver something that resolves the real problem in our world. That's something I think every product manager aims to do, right? So as I mentioned, here is a very simple and high-level product/data flow. As a data product manager, always you need to keep in mind for these key 4 aspects. What are your data sources? And where are you going to store your data? And also, what is the analytics platform you want to support your end user to use? And the last part is about insight visualization, or you want to feed your data into another application or use it in a very automated way. Keep these 4 aspects in your mind. It's very important for a data product manager. If you view this as a data pipeline, eventually you will realize you need to look back and see what are the questions there you haven't been resolved yet. And if you realize this in a later phase, you probably need to pay more for fixing the problem. Okay. I see Anthony did the survey. Half of you guys actually work on data product. So hopefully this is very familiar for you. Those are listed down some very common data sources like internal capture the data. Whatever business there, they capture some transaction data or finance data, whatever data there. That's the business internal data there. And some public data from social media, like in Tencent, when we worked for some NLP platform, we actually process thousands of public websites there as well. And it's very common for those websites product. We connect the data from user cookies or user behavior data. For example, take eBay, for example. People do search there, so we connect people's search behavior. And some vendors data like data files, for example, you may have vendors inventory insights, and those inventory insights can fit into your system with data files, and you need to consider this as your data source as well. So, etc. They are part of one of our data sets there. But for your own product, you need to consider what are the available data you can get continuously, not just one batch or 2 batches. You need to think about to make sure your product workable. Are you able to get continuous data to support your product? That's very important. Second one, I think that's a very lateral layer in the overall product journey, but why I want to mention it here. Probably the first time when you look at this, you feel, okay, that's a technical layer. Why I need to care about this? I'm a product people. But eventually, you will realize, okay, without a cost affordable platform, you actually can't make your product successfully. I don't want to share company name, but I do have some good examples in the industry. So some company could build a platform 5 or 10 years ago. They built just for that time needs. But after a few years later, when the user wants to do something more to really suitable for what business scenarios. They can't scale a platform. They have to reinvest and rebuild the platform. So as a product manager, if you ignore this part, you eventually see actually you have to pay attention to that. So what platform is cost effective and suitable for my product? There are some key aspects I listed here. You need to think about from your any business scenario, are you going to just present some history data, or you need near real time or even real time data? So you need to think about what are the business scenarios you are going to really match, and think about from data perspective, how to get it ready for your product. And regarding performance and data latency here, I'm really talking about for the data process, how much time it will take. It will take a whole day, or even a few days, or a few hours or seconds. You need to consider that. Again, it's related to your business scenario. So I think everyone uses Google Maps, right? If you view your Google Map, now you are going home, but if Google Map just feed you a history data of yesterday, it doesn't help. Even a few minutes ago, it doesn't help. It needs to be relatively real time. A few seconds delay probably acceptable, but longer than a few seconds, it's not useful or helpful. Then the third point is about scalable architecture or infrastructure. Again, that's some good examples in the industry. If you don't pay attention to this, then you eventually need to pay double or triple size of the investment there. Robust framework. I think this one it's a very interesting one. So initially, before I came to New Zealand, I didn't know that we have a manager service here, because in most of the modern companies like Tencent or eBay, after they finish the project, they probably at most need one or less than one people to maintain the whole project, because they try to automate everything, automate as much as possible, and the framework is very robust. So say some job failed, then people just need to check, okay, whether there is a process or automatically recover data or not. They don't need to even click a button there. But here we have, in some of our companies, we have 2 or 3 or even more engineers to look after jobs every day and try to fix the problems and need to manually recover the data. So it's quite costly. And the last one, I think the data today, given the current worldwide situation, is very sensitive about the data ownership. So how to meet the data compliance requirements and data security requirements, that's definitely something as a product manager you need to consider. You don't want to make a product, eventually your data cannot be used, right? That's key of it, so keep that in mind. And automated, that's something already mentioned about. So try to automate as much as possible. One good example is, I think always stakeholder, when they look at a report or dashboard, their question will be, oh really? The data dropped so much or increased so much. Does it make sense too? Does it really make sense? What happened behind that? How can you tell them your data is reliable, is correct? I think I don't see quite many companies really create or a very good data quality dashboard here. So in that class, usually I recommend that my team create a very clear, easy to understand quality dashboard to tell people whenever they have a question to your data, show them, okay, how you process your data, how many table, how many data marks you processed, and how accurate it is, whether you really recover your data timely when something failure happens. So that's just one example. And this one actually related to this data recovery as well. So try to automate as much as you can, and eventually it will save your time and save your cost. Analytics platforms and engines. This one a really important layer for end users. So especially for these advanced users like data analysts, data scientists, usually they face this layer. So we need to really think about who are my customers. Initially, in one of the companies, very interesting, we established analytics platform, and the finance people complain like, I can't write a SQL, how can I use this platform? So which means they are not a real user for this layer, they actually want some easy user-friendly interface instead of analytics platform seeker-facing or some script-facing interface. So as a product manager, you need to think about who are your customer. When the customer comes to you, you need to think about whether this analytics platform is suitable for him or a handy dashboard or report is more suitable for him or her. That's a good point to consider. And second one I want to share is about data storing. I think it's quite often that people say, okay, here are the tables, here is the columns, here are objects you can get, but so what? That's just a bunch of objects there. What's the data story you want to tell your user? I think that's very important. So let's link to the third and the fourth point as well. So what's your business questions to be answered, and what's the modern tools you can leverage to tell people the good hero stories? You need to guide your user to do that, because if you just throw the data to them, they say, my job is still busy, I'm still busy with so I still need to use this data, that data to compile a dashboard I need to use. But what's the data story? It's hard for them to identify that sometimes. So as a product manager, think about this. How can you help your user? Insights visualization or data feed. I think insight visualization is a very common thing for every company, but most of the company actually they don't have the user designer involved in this area. They will feel, okay, I visualize my data in a report or dashboard, that's enough. But that's not enough, really. So involve your user designer, think about how can my customer get a point by data directly, not just here and there and try to make up their own dashboard by using some other 20, 30 dashboards. I heard from one client say they have over 300 dashboards or reports. And they're lost in their dashboards or reports. Then people say, okay, I can fill you one more dashboard. Say, no, I don't need more. My question is this, tell me, how can you solve my problem? That's simple and straightforward, right? And second point, I think it's not very common so far. I just know that eBay did that. So can the insights be fed into relevant apps? One good scenario is initially when I work in inventory insights area, we actually calculate the product in median price, and we want to fit this median price to the website so the buyers can refer to this price to determine whether the product is worth of buying. And usually, in most organizations, they do this manually just for some key products. But for us, we really automate the whole process. So we fit the data into websites by automating the process. It's very simple, straightforward. And I think here, we can think about this as well. We just take further step to see, okay, if some human work can be replaced by automation or not. If it is, why not, right? And there are definitely some modern analytics tools in the industry as well. So we want to leverage more flexible tools other than human design there. Say some tools like Cubic Sense. I know that actually offer contextual analytics, and they offer some modern design to automatically discover the data pattern. All these modern features we should leverage. We shouldn't just create from scratch. It just spend too much time on that. If you leverage a tool and use it appropriately, it's so much easier for your life, and your end user experience would be much better as well. Okay, a little bit of recap here. So I talked too much. I think I want you guys to take away key items here. Actionable insights are key. I think everyone agrees with that, but let's do it. That's very important. Don't just throw data or dashboard to your user. Give them some actionable insights. Tell them, okay, what is up, what is done, and what's behind that, what you can do to resolve your problem, or even push the message, push the information to your user. So there's no need to struggling with hundreds of dashboards or reports every day. Make their life easier. They will love you. Automated process of consuming insights. That's not easy, I know, but let's try, take a little bit step, you will get benefit as well. So marketing manager, they don't want to be lost in hundreds of campaign events. Salespeople, they don't want to, look at hundreds of dashboards and try to see what sales activity they can do. Try to automate, try to understand what's their daily job and automate something for them. Flexible design. Here, some example here, flexible design. So I just want to share one example. So for most of the dashboard, I think you guys are probably familiar with Power BI or Tableau. You see, we have a list of filters at top or at the right panel or left panel, then are fixed dashboards there. That's the common design there. But a flexible design, to me, one example is, think about just one more step further. Are you able to actually categorize your filters? Say you have 20 or 30 filters there. Think about, are you able to categorize this into 2 or 3 layers? Just put a common filters there, so your basic user can use this filter like a country, city, something like that. And think about, what about advanced user? They want to understand your dashboard further, slice and dice your dashboard with, say, payment method, agenda, age group, something like that. And even more filters you can think about. So according to your business scenario, think about how can you categorize these filters and to suitable for different groups of users. Technical people, less technical people, business people, so on. I solve real world problems. That's my principle. I don't want to work on something I'm not sure. I want to really be clear about the problem, the business problem, real world problem. Is it a real problem there? If it is, go to solve it, right? Otherwise, you need to figure out the real opportunities there. And always have your customers in your heart. So keep your customers in your heart. That's very important. Sometimes when people are building something, they feel it's struggling. Okay, I just try to get my job done daily, day after day, month after month. Okay, eventually I get it done. But where is your customer? Are you really solving a real problem for your customer? I think that's a common principle for all products and for data products too. Robust and scalable platform, automate as much as you can. That's simple, and let's do it. Continue to source data, only and reliable data. It looks very simple, but keep that in your mind before you build your product. Think about it. If you don't have that, really ask yourself, are you really going to build some data product, or you just do an experiment? Take it seriously. I think that's very important. Yeah. Anthony.
All right, so we'll end on a bit of a tough topic, is around ethics in product management and how that relates to data. This is, as I said, it's definitely, well, it's not even an emerging conversation. It's something this has been a conversation for a little while now. For those of you who are old as I am will remember the movie, The First Jurassic Park. Has everyone seen The First Jurassic Park? Yeah, it's a great quote. There's a slightly adapted quote here from the character that Jeff Goldblum plays. You know, the engineers were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they just didn't stop to ask themselves whether or not they should. And this applies a lot to database products, because our data's got bias. We've got bias as people building those products. Our customers have bias. Are our products reinforcing that bias? So my former employer who are here, working for a company who was supplying products to McDonald's, is there a risk that actually, well, this person likes to buy cheeseburgers, are we just going to keep on pushing cheeseburgers at them forever until they get diabetes and die? That's probably not ideal. And again, I mentioned the social network earlier, you know, are we reinforcing people's bad habits with this feature? Are we putting something into our product that's actually going to make, it might give us revenue, but is it actually going to make the life of our customers harder? And this is something, it's a bit of a realization as a product person. It's like, well, I'm just here to you know, design features that are going to sell really well, right? But actually, you have to think about the social construct around that. Like, can I actually sleep at night from the product that I'm building? Which is kind of scary, actually. As a product manager, it's a scary realization when you go, oh, actually, should I do this? And when I've got all this weight of stakeholders coming down on me to sort of say, look, we need to do this, it's going to make us lots of money. Trying to push back on that, it's actually a really hard part of the job. And we have to do better than just will we get sued as a result of putting it out there. I think there are a lot of products right now that are being built basically to the limit of, okay, we're going to put this out there, we know we won't get sued for it. As product people, we have to do better than that. We have to actually do things that are ethical and make the lives of our customer better. Otherwise, we end up in the situation that Facebook finds themselves in at the moment, where they're kind of becoming public enemy number one. So when I looked for an image to kind of represent some of the issues out there with algorithms and data right now, it wasn't hard to find a few quotes. The famous case from one of them around where data and machine learning algorithms were used to for sentencing. I think it was somewhere in the US, and of course that naturally picked up bias around African Americans. I said, okay, well, African Americans by and large have a longer sentencing time because of the social issues in that area, but of course the data doesn't know about the social issues. It just sees the numbers and was applying longer sentences to them, which is a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. And it's often because in data doesn't necessarily allow us to walk that correlation causation kind of calculation. Yeah, just because something is correlated doesn't necessarily mean that that's the cause of it at heart. And so that's where I talked earlier about bringing that user research together with the data science cycle. Connecting those two things is really, really important. And it's because the data lacks the real world context. It just tells you what happened out there, but it doesn't tell you why. And also, machine learning techniques in particular are not very good at novelty. They're good at telling you, based on what happened before, this is what I think is going to happen next. But it's, because history, then we're going to get future. And that, random stuff happens in the universe, and the algorithms don't detect that. So yeah, don't do that. So on that note, that's the end of the talk. I'd like to stop the break for Q&A now.
I'll kick it off. So from your side, what's a good makeup of a product and data team that works together well? From a go-to-market side and also from the internal development side.
This is something I'm actually working with Harmony at the moment on, and that so my personal view, organisation and politics notwithstanding, is that actually product, data science and user research should be one team. If not literally, then virtually. It should be a data scientist sitting with the user researcher, sitting with the product manager, and all collaborating very closely together. Have you got any thoughts on that, Amy?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. User research and the data science is definitely very important. And for data product team, definitely not data product team, data team, you need to consider, okay, your platform engineer, your data engineer, your quality engineer. It's very interesting. I just had a conversation with some data engineers this morning, and I tried very hard to explain why we need a data quality engineer for the team. Then some of the data engineers told me, okay, Amy, I have the source data there. I process the data and shows there for my end user. My job done. Everyone's happy. Why we need data quality engineer? I said, how can you guarantee what you do was correct? I said, I must do the testing myself. So it's sometimes it's very interesting. You need to educate team member and really have everyone understand those important roles. And I forgot to mention about data analysts and business analysts.
Oh, yes, of course.
Those are my good buddies. Usually I work closely with my VA and DA. Yeah, I really like those people.
Oh, I have one more. So when talking about data stories and kind of the additional insights other than just putting a graph onto your reports and your dashboard, like, do you have any insights, favorite techniques or visualizations on how to tell data stories when you share reports?
You want me to
Oh, yes.
Yeah, either of you, yeah.
I just want to mention about the tool named the Elephant in which I work in Fracture. I think the Elephant is a good tool to really put a frame of how to tell a data user story there, so you can fit into your data into that frame, and it can be shared to the user directly. It's very easy. So my point I already mentioned in my previous slides, try to leverage modern tools. Pre-applying modern tools really help you to save your time. Or you can work on it from yourself and fit it into data data and share with your end user.
And my advice would be to find a unicorn called a data story user experience person. And when you find one, tell me, hire them. No, there are very few people in user experience and design who understand how to tell good data stories. I have not come across very many so far, and it is becoming a real emerging area. And so it's you know, hopefully you can find a user experience or product design person who kind of can understand insights and how to communicate them and can learn that storytelling piece. Or, as Amy said, often that comes out of it like a data analyst role as well. Like a data analyst can be very good at telling stories as well. So it's just helping them sort of round off their sort of user experience, product design kind of chops and getting those people working really closely together. If you don't do that, you will have a bad time, and I say that from personal experience.
Okay. Normally, I would involve, as a product manager, I would involve a user designer, data analyst, or a business analyst, a small group to talk about what's the business problem to be resolved and how can I help my user to understand the data to solve the problem. It needs a group of people with it.
Yeah.
There's a question online, and I forgot to mention earlier, if you are on the Zoom, feel free to put a question into the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get to those questions as well. So I should have mentioned that at the beginning of the talk. Failed. So there's a question here, how early in the data product life cycle does needs a data engineer involved? Or how early in the life cycle do we need to get a data engineer involved? The beginning. I have made that mistake the hard way, learned that lesson the hard way around not getting data engineers involved soon enough, because we go, right, we have this amazing data source and we get all these insights off it, and often the data science team, it all works, and our model tells us great stuff, and it's all perfect, great, fantastic, we've done our modeling, got a user research person involved, and so it's all correlates to interview behavior. Right, awesome, let's put it into production. Oh crap, I can't get this data source into our production engine. Damn. Or I'm going to spend a whole pile of months doing that. Yeah, and I literally lived that just recently, where it was, you know, working on some machine learning driven stuff where it, you know, it was easy enough to model, but it actually took us a number of months to get it into production because we hadn't fully thought through the pipeline aspects of getting that data through. And had we had a data engineer involved a lot earlier, we would have at least known that that was a problem. And I think as a result, we ended up iterating the machine learning model a little bit to try and reduce the number of data sources to take out the difficult ones. So yeah, the sooner the better to get data engineers involved.
Yes, totally agree with that.
Thanks, says Hubert.
I think there's a question over there.
You know, excuse me coming in from the position of ignorance in this, but I'm really curious about where you got a data analytics opportunity. How do you have conversations about here's what you could do, or no, you just that's just not possible. Where you're dealing with, especially like, you know, senior management, you kind of don't get what the possibilities are. You know, whether you've got, hey, this is really possible, we can do this, or no, you need to calm down a bit.
I think Anthony covered a good part for the discovery thing. So with the discovery life cycle there, you can involve your data scientist, data engineer, this group of people to think about these aspects. Whether based on a batch of data, you can do something and then generate insights. Then consider, are you going to get continuous data to support the whole product? I think that's very important. And then even do some interview with your end user. This really generates value for them to solve their problems. I think for me, I would like to really follow those process very, very strict. If you try to skip something, eventually you will see, okay, a small point could result in a big hole there.
Right, thank you.
And I think to add to that, what product managers always think about return on investment. So, you know, management stakeholder waving arms saying, right, we absolutely must have this insight in our product. And we look at it and go, okay, look, you know what, that's actually really, really, really expensive to produce. or to get into the core product. So to Amy's point, we then go and have a conversation with our users and actually find that secretly a lot of them really don't need that insight and just that stakeholder's opinion. And so that makes that conversation not easy, but easier, that you can kind of ease the stakeholder into say, hey, look, we've gone in there and we've done a bit of research. This is what we've found. We've found that actually people aren't getting as much value from that. So, and it's going to be really expensive for us to do. Do you still want to do it?
So diving into that, what are some approaches to put value on the additional value that insights bring?
Good question. How would you value the additional insights that are coming in? Talking to users, basically. Get that qualitative feedback from the
When
user.
you say user, like, we'll give you this data, is that useful? They can say, hell yes, it is.
So that's
It's gonna save my life, you know, even though you can solve any problem, right?
the dark art of user interviews is where that one comes in. So that's yeah, just following, and that's why again I like to get user researchers to do my user interviews because they're amazing at determining that kind of thing. I just send them off and say, hey, can you figure this out for me, please? But there's techniques there like Kano modeling and things like that. Like well, what if you didn't have this, or what if you had this instead? All of those user interviewing techniques is exactly the same techniques that you would apply to any other product feature, but apply to analytics. And that's actually where companies get themselves into trouble, that the analytics gets viewed as something different or special in the product, not as a product feature. And so the same rigor that gets applied to a product feature doesn't get applied to analytics. And as Tony's point, we dig ourselves a hole. So it's just applying the same principles that we apply to our main product features to this.
Yeah, initially when I start some project, so some simple ways we actually use is like, okay, I resolve a problem for my category managers. I just basically consider, okay, how many category managers in the whole company? And if I do this, how much time I can save them, or how much time I can save for my any other customers. We can really consider this. And if I don't do this, will my business be able to continue? These big questions, I think we really can figure out the answer to help you determine whether it's a good opportunity or not.
Sort of self-referential. Do we have data to support the use of our data?
But there's that user data. There's also that user data for exploratory insights, right? And so it's very difficult to assign value to that user data. That's a cost center in our view versus what should be a profit center.
Yeah, that's a tough one. There's always that thing of, I'm going to gather this data because I might need it someday.
Yeah.
And it is a really hard one to walk because, you're crystal ball gazing at that point. You just don't know what you don't know. And I know it's a best practice in terms of product analytics and some of the stuff you've written, Karina, and others in that space have written around sort of saying, well, actually sometimes just don't. Just, gather the data that you need. It's always possible to get proxy. If you find some data point in the future that you don't have, you can either introduce it and just wait a little bit to let your data accumulate, or do qualitative research instead of the quantitative, or find proxies for your data. Like, it's actually sometimes worse to just gather all the things, because then when you come to do your analysis on it, you've just got such a massive data set that's really, really, really slow. And I know that from hard-won experience from Plexure, where they have a very large data set, and you can't see the wood for the trees when you've got this massive data set.
And don't forget, sometimes you can buy valuable data from market as well. If you feel it's very important and useful, go to find it in the market, pay for it, you will find it's worth of buying it.
You could, but should you?
Yeah.
Depends on what kind of data.
Yeah.
I think there was one more question down there.
Oh, probably the last one. From your experience, so how do you, what's the best practice you've been performed to keep your data, doing the continuous sanity check, and also what kind of practice you've been doing to prevent your data being, polluted, and how did you sell your ideas to the executive level and also shareholders? Yeah.
I think you have some good
Oh,
experience.
yeah. So mistake number one that every company makes is treating data different to function. You know, we have you know, CI/CD pipelines for functionality in our products. So, you know, we've got all of these great unit tests around whether or not, you know, if I deploy this change, does our UI break and things like that. I have yet to see really good examples of people applying that same logic to data and data pipelines, and I have been bitten totally on the bum by that. Because, yeah, if you're not looking at the change in data by virtue of the change in function and you're not doing testing on that, the problems that create are infinitely worse than a piece of functionality breaking. So typical example, so in chats with the Harmony head of data science, and one of the things that he was complaining about for his team is that he was saying, well, our engineering team really underestimates the impact of a breaking function that causes bad data, because it takes my team you know, 10 times as long as it does for them to fix the function to actually fix the data. The data's a lot harder to fix. So the value of doing that is really, really, really high. And so to your question around selling that to the executive, it's the fact that, you know, if I think 1x of cost to fix a bug in function, you know, 10x, 100x that cost to fix that problem in data. And depending on the situation, but that's, you know, a couple of organizations I've worked for, it's around about that kind of ratio.
I heard a good example in the industry say that based on data analyzing, the team figured out there is a small setting needs to be turned on or turned off for a product, then that lifted the revenue for 30%.
Then you imagine, okay, well, because we've got polluted data, we miss out on that. That should be an easy conversation to have with the executive, hopefully, if they're sensible, smart people, of course. Any other questions? Anything online? No? Fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Tech Futures Lab, for hosting us as well.